Let not your heart be troubled. You are listening to the Sean Hannity Radio Show podcast. If you're like me and suffer from insomnia, you know what? That's not fun. I tried everything. I couldn't get a good night's sleep. And this is neither drug nor alcohol induced. That's right. It is My Pillow. Mike Lindell invented it, and he fitted me for my first My Pillow, and it's changed my life. I fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and the good news, you can too. Just go to mypillow.com, promo code Sean, and take advantage of one of Mike Lindell's best offers, his special 4-pack. You get 50% off 2 My Pillow premium pillows, 2 Go Anywhere pillows. Now, My Pillow's made in the USA, has a 60-day unconditional money-back guarantee, no risk to you, and a 10-year warranty. You don't want to spend more sleepless nights on a pillow tossing and turning that's not working for you. Just go to mypillow.com right now, use the promo code Sean, and you get Mike Lindell's special 4-pack. You get 2 My Pillow premium pillows, 2 Go Anywhere pillows, 50% off, and you'll start getting the kind of peaceful and restful and comfortable and deep healing and recuperative sleep you've been craving and deserve. MyPillow.com, promo code Sean. All right, what a busy news week this is turning out to be. We have all the latest as it relates to Judge Kavanaugh, who has said he will not be intimidated. All of the issues surrounding, quote, final second release of another woman. There's a lot of issues, according to this case, and a lot more that we're going to get to. We've had drama all day. Rod Rosenstein is going to the White House. He expects to be fired. The only problem was he wasn't fired, and the president wasn't even in the White House all day. He's been in New York at the United Nations moments ago, making this comment about the situation in Washington.
I'm meeting with Rod Rosenstein on Thursday when I get back from all of these meetings, and we'll be meeting at the White House, and we'll be determining what's going on. We want to have transparency, we want to have openness, and I look forward to meeting with Rod at that time. Okay?
What do you want to do with Mr. Rosenstein? What would you like to do?
Well, we're going to have a meeting on Thursday when I get back. Right now, today, we're meeting with a lot of great people, including President Moon, and we're, over the next couple of days, as you know, we're meeting with many countries. Tomorrow, we're giving a big speech, but I'll be back on Thursday, and when I get back, we're going to have a meeting. I spoke with Rod today, and we're going to have a meeting on Thursday when I get back to the White House. I want to say the country, the United States, as President Moon pointed out when we first met, the United States is doing better economically than we've ever done before. The numbers are outstanding. New numbers will be released that I think will just continue this forward march, and I think we have tremendous potential on the upside. I'm very excited about our new trade agreement, and this is a brand new agreement. This is not an old one rewritten. This is a brand new agreement, and I'm very excited about that for the United States, and I really believe it's good for both countries. But the numbers that we're doing in the United States, whether it be unemployment numbers or whether it be employment numbers, we have right now, this moment, more people working in the United States than ever before in our history. That's some number, Mike, right? And it's a number that people did not expect to see. It's a number that nobody thought would happen, certainly within 2 years. We're not even up to 2 years of the administration. So we have more people working in the United States today than we've ever had. Our unemployment numbers are among the best they've ever had. For African American, it's the lowest we've ever had. For Asian American, for Hispanics, the lowest we've ever had. And we're very proud of that. And on top of that, we have many companies moving back into the United States. In most cases, it's back. They left, and now they're coming back. They all want to be where the action is. So I appreciate your kind words, but our economy is the envy right now of the world. We're the fastest growing economy in the world. Think of it, as large as we are, we're the fastest growing economy in the world, up $10 trillion. So we're very proud of that. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, that was the president. He is at the UN, and that was the irony. I know Axios had written today the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, had verbally offered to resign in discussions with the White House Chief of Staff, General Kelly, according to a source close to Rosenstein. Anyway, it was a media buildup all day that culminated in the president saying, no, we're actually meeting Thursday. Sarah Sanders had put out a statement about this, saying that at the request of the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, he and President Trump had an extended conversation to discuss the recent news stories. That, of course, being the New York Times story that in a conversation with notes taken by Andrew McCabe, well, who's a known liar, and also Lisa Page, that, in fact, he had talked about, oh, do you want me to record the president? Do you want me to, in other words, when he goes to the White House to show chaos, and then we can invoke the 25th Amendment? Rod Rosenstein is denying it. Anyway, because the president is at the United Nations General Assembly, which is awful if you live in New York City or work in New York City. It means your life is a living hell. And just hoping that maybe the United Nations finds another home one of these days, someplace beautiful. Well, they're actually on the water. Sorry. But anyway, so Rod Rosenstein is going to meet with the president on Thursday when he returns to Washington. I have a lot more on all of the drama and the coverage that has gone on. If you have not been following the news today, there is a lot to get to as it relates to Judge Kavanaugh, which is where we begin. By the way, I want to give a quick update to our stations across the Sean Hannity Show network. We expect the president is going to be holding a press conference in about 33 minutes from now, 3:45 Eastern time, 12:45 Pacific. And when that happens, we will be covering it most likely in its entirety. We also have Sarah and Greg on the program today. People that know Judge Kavanaugh will also be joining us later in the program today. So we have a lot of ground to cover in the course of the day. We have another woman that has come forward, and I'm going to get to the specifics of that case. But let me first take you back to Friday night. And there was a 10 p.m. deadline. If you were with us all last week, we were reporting the back and forth, the raising of the bar almost on a daily basis by a pretty liberal activist attorney of Professor Ford. That's neither here nor there at the moment, but somebody who didn't believe Paula Jones, nor did she think Paula Jones had a case, and I'll get back to that, and somebody who had defended Al Franken, which only means that Professor Ford's attorney is not consistent on this particular issue and happens to be a pretty solid left-wing activist, having donated lots of money to Democratic causes and campaigns. But that, again, is her attorney. That's not her. So Friday night, the deadline was set 10 o'clock. Are you going to come next week or not? At the last minute, it was about 9:40 Friday night. I know it was during Hannity, my TV show. Word came in that they wanted another day, another 24 hours. Now, remember, there had been the attorney for Professor Ford at first said, yeah, no, she's willing to testify in public under oath. Glad to do it. And then it became an issue. OK, when are we going to do it? And then it became an issue. Well, we can't have people that disagree with the accusations, in other words, talking to my client. And then it became just a series of this back and forth. I don't even think they finally have agreed now completely to Thursday. So who knows what's going to happen by Thursday. So that happened Friday. By all accounts, it's been set. When you look at all of the witnesses, now we're talking about Professor Ford's case here, to support the allegation that she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh. This is going back to her high school days, although she didn't remember the location, she didn't remember the year, and all of the details that we went through last week. And the fact that Dianne Feinstein held on to this letter. She knew back in July that Professor Ford made this allegation because she had a letter from Professor Ford. Only today did she share that letter with Charles Grassley and her Republican colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee. All the time she met alone with Judge Kavanaugh, she never once brought the issue up with him. All the times they had these public hearings, not one time, and they all knew it, did any Democrat bring up the issue of Professor Ford, which raises a lot of questions about how they have politicized this from the get-go. Now, in the interim, we know this, that all of the witnesses that have been cited by Christine Ford to support her allegation, that when they were in high school together, don't exactly know the year, they think it's about 1982, and she had made this claim that she was in a bathing suit and had other clothes on top of, and she felt she was assaulted by then I guess a junior at the time, Judge Kavanaugh. But since that time, the Senate Judiciary Committee, who I think has been handling this, they have done the right thing. Anybody that is rushed to judgment here is playing politics. Now, you can believe an allegation if you want to. That's up to everybody. That's everybody's prerogative here. I have had too many experiences in my life where I have not rushed to judgment and have been proven right when the media and many others are wrong. One high-profile case was the Duke lacrosse case. I actually did my reporting, my investigative work, by going to meet with the families of the accused at the time. In the case of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, everybody thought that case was a slam dunk. The president weighed in politically as well. He rushed to judgment. In that case, President Obama at the time. And then we have the case, and I actually did investigative work then. I went and interviewed George Zimmerman. And another high-profile case was Ferguson, Missouri. Another high-profile case was Freddie Gray in Baltimore. And everybody rushes to judgment. After I had done my due diligence, I said, none of these cops are going to ever be convicted in the case of Freddie Gray. Never. Everybody thought that Officer Darren Wilson was going to be indicted and convicted. It was the eyewitnesses in the neighborhood, one after another, that backed up the story of Officer Darren Wilson, although his career ended as a result of it. So there's always a rush to judgment that I refuse to get involved in. I learned this deeply when I lived in Atlanta. It was 1996, the Olympic Park bombing. And everybody thought the Atlanta Journal-Constitution comes out with, he fits the profile of a lone bomber. Their proof, he lives with his mother. And I didn't know it at the time. Richard Jewell was listening to me on the air that day, and I was probably the only one in the media there at the time that said, that doesn't mean he's a killer. Doesn't mean he's a bomber. And he ended up telling me long after that ended and gave me an interview then on Hannity and Combs, one of his first, that he appreciated one person stood up for him and just gave the presumption of innocence as the media went wild. Same thing's happening here. When people say, I believe it, they've made up their minds. And by making up their minds, they're not believing in due process. They're not believing in a fundamental core of our justice system, which is the presumption of innocence. Now we know the Senate Judiciary Committee, which rightly has been accommodating to every request Professor Ford and her attorney has made, although they're not going to allow Judge Kavanaugh to go first and Professor Ford second because he has the right to respond to her allegations. Anyway, every witness, and I'll get to this when we get back, cited by Professor Ford herself to support her allegation that she was assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh, has now given their accounts to the Senate Judiciary Committee. All four contradict Professor Ford's version of events. Now, we're going to get into this new allegation that is being made. I've read this piece and highlighted this piece by Jane Mayer and Ronan Farrow, and I got to tell you something. There's a lot of problems with this new allegation. A lot. Judge Kavanaugh has now responded. I will not be intimidated. And everybody should have this fundamental belief. There are so many that don't, but only at convenient times. Because when Keith Ellison, the number 2 guy at the DNC, is accused by his girlfriend of physical and emotional abuse on a fairly regular basis, interesting that none of these people that are rushing to judgment on Judge Kavanaugh have had a word, not a peep, about Keith Ellison. And many of them were big lovers of all things Clinton. So the outrage you're hearing and seeing is so often has it's selective moral outrage with a political taint to it all. Because if they cared about the issue, they'd be consistent.
With only a kite, a house key, and wet hemp string, Benjamin Franklin captured lightning in a bottle. Over 260 years later, with a little resourcefulness, ingenuity, and grit, we're not only capturing energy from the sun and wind, we're storing it, ensuring Americans have the energy they need whenever they need it. Learn more about the nation's leader in energy storage at nexteraenergy.com.
So those that are rushing to judgment, I believe her, they've already made up their minds. Republicans have been responsible, trying to accommodate. The president has been trying to accommodate, changing, varying, demands, et cetera, days, et cetera. Well, okay, that all happened. But in the case of, in an update released by the Senate Judiciary Committee that have taken seriously, as they should, Professor Ford's allegations against Judge Kavanaugh, they learned the identities of all 4 individuals that Professor Ford claimed were at the party where the alleged abuse took place. The committee reached out to every one of them and asked for the opportunity to have a confidential interview. And all 4 of them, deny knowledge of any party matching Professor Ford's description. And the committee noted Dr. Ford's is the only first-hand witness not to provide a statement or interview to the committee, and we'll see if she, in fact, wants to give her story on Thursday. Now, when we come back, we're going to get to this second accuser in the New Yorker and Kavanaugh's letter and statement, I will not be intimidated. That's next. All right, so much to get to today. We haven't even touched the Rod Rosenstein drama that has been unfolding all day. We'll get to that. We have Judge Kavanaugh's letter. We'll get to that. I will not be intimidated. I also asked that, well, I'll tell you about Dianne Feinstein in a minute. We'll get to that. Let me, again, go back to Friday. We need to set this up properly. So the Senate Judiciary Committee has been getting all these ever-changing requests. I'm not showing up. I'm showing up. I'm going to show up only under these conditions, et cetera. And they have tried to be extraordinarily accommodating, and I think for the right reasons, considering the severity of Professor Ford's allegation. Now she's set to testify on Thursday. Okay, now that's step one. Now, in the interim, in spite of Dianne Feinstein never handing over the July letter from Professor Ford until today, never came out till today. All these opportunities, public hearings, private meetings, the Democrats have all been in on this. They've all known about this letter, and they hid it from the Republicans. And even since it has become public, they would not hand over the letter until earlier today. Now, all of the witnesses cited by Professor Ford to support her allegation that she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh have now given their accounts. They've been working to the Senate Judiciary Committee. All 4 contradict Professor Ford's version of events. And so in an update that was released yesterday, the Senate Judiciary Committee said it was investigating Dr. Ford's allegations against Judge Kavanaugh for the last week. And it has now learned the identities of the 4 individuals that Dr. Ford claimed were at the party where the alleged abuse took place. The 4 individuals that Professor Ford claimed attending the party were Judge Kavanaugh, Mark Judge. He's the one that came out first and also had alcohol problems at the time. And had said, I guess in a book or something he had written, that he had blacked out a lot at that time when he was heavily abusing alcohol. Patrick Smythe and a woman by the name of Miss Leland Ingram Kaiser. Now, the committee reached out to each person for an opportunity to conduct a confidential interview. All 4 of them, Mr. Judge, Mr. Smythe, Miss Kaiser, all deny having knowledge of any party matching Dr. Ford's description, which obviously would bolster Mr. Kavanaugh's denials. Now, the Senate has to make a decision here. One of the things they're going to have to factor in, and I'll get to the second woman that broke late last night, is the entirety of this man's life. They're going to have to Anybody that is fair-minded will be willing to give this man due process, the presumption of innocence. And as much as the Democrats, it's ironic, Dianne Feinstein is now demanding Grassley postpone the hearings. Well, Dianne Feinstein set the timeline to this by not releasing the information and not bringing it up until the last minute. She set the timeline here. And then you've got Avenatti on the, it's sort of like a sideshow to me. I know, I have evidence, I have people, and he tries to now insert himself into everything. But we even have the woman that came forward to New York Magazine on Sunday with a claim that Brett Kavanaugh exposed himself to her during a drunken party at Yale, telling Ronan Farrow and Jane Mayer of the New Yorker that she was no longer sure that her allegation is true. This is just breaking. This was on National Review Online. Jane Mayer said today that Deborah Ramirez, who accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexually harassing her, told her New Yorker colleague, Ronan Farrow, that she couldn't be sure of the Supreme Court nominee's guilt. Confronted with a New York Times report indicating they had spent all week last week apparently researching this, expressing doubts about Kavanaugh's guilt in this particular second allegation. Mayer said Ramirez shared those doubts before they published their bombshell report on Sunday. To Ronan, she said she wasn't absolutely certain. She needed to make certain before she was going to say anything publicly. She remembered the specifics, the graphic specifics, and tried to remember for sure who that man was who was in her face. There were no eyewitness accounts in this story. Several of Kavanaugh's friends and roommates from his time at Yale, some of whom were said to have been in the room, released statements denying that ever took place. I mean, the New York Times interviewed several dozen people for the entire week last week in an attempt to, and this is in the Times story, this is from them, trying to corroborate Miss Ramirez's story. And they could find no one with firsthand knowledge. No one. Miss Ramirez herself contacted former Yale classmates, asking them if they recalled the incident, and told some of them that she could not be certain Mr. Kavanaugh was the one who exposed himself. Well, I mean, why are we now at this point? I've read the New Yorker piece carefully numerous times, and the New Yorker has not confirmed with any other eyewitnesses that Kavanaugh was even present at the party. From their own words, her memories contain, quote, gaps, because she had been drinking heavily and was inebriated at the time of the alleged incident. It wasn't until she had been, gone through the issue, let me put it that way, for 6 days that Ramirez said she felt confident enough of her recollections to say she remembers Kavanaugh had exposed himself at a drunken dormitory party. 6 days. Now, she acknowledges she quickly became, quote her words, she quickly became inebriated at the party. She acknowledged, quote, she was on the floor, foggy, slurring her words. Ramirez acknowledged there were significant gaps in her memories of the evening. The alleged eyewitnesses all deny it. The first one said one of the male classmates who Ramirez said egged on Kavanaugh denied any memory of the party. I don't think Brett would flash himself to Debbie or anyone else for that matter. The second said the other male classmate Ramirez said was involved in the incident said, I have zero recollection of this. Her college best friend even denied it by saying, this is a woman I was best friends with. We shared intimate details of our lives, and I was never told this story by her or by anyone else. It never came up. I didn't see it. I never heard of it happening. And by the way, other contemporaries deny it as well. In a statement, two of those male students who Ramirez alleged were involved in the incident, the wife of the third male student said, she said was involved. Three other classmates, they give the names, disputed Ramirez's account of events. Quote, we were the people closest to Brett Kavanaugh during his first year at Yale. He was a roommate to some of us. We spent a great deal of time with him, including in the dorm where this incident allegedly took place. Some of us were also friends with Debbie Ramirez during and after her time at Yale. We can say with confidence that if this incident Debbie alleges ever occurred, we would have seen or heard about it, and we did not. The behavior she describes would be completely out of character for Brett Kavanaugh. In addition, some of us knew Debbie long after Yale. She never described this incident until Brett's Supreme Court nomination was pending. Editors from The New Yorker contacted some of us because we are the people who would know the truth, and we told them we never saw or heard about this. Now, Kavanaugh also personally has denied it. This alleged event from 35 years ago did not happen. The people who knew me then know that this did not happen and have said so. This is a smear, plain and simple. I look forward to testifying on Thursday about the truth and defending my good name and my reputation and character and integrity that I have spent a lifetime building against these last-minute allegations. Now, we have to look at these words that are actually in everything I'm reading here was in the New Yorker piece. Everything. Now the question is, I can't believe I'm even saying, the New York Times, the people that printed the anonymous piece on Trump, they interviewed several dozen people. They couldn't find a single person to corroborate the story of Miss Ramirez and her own gaps in memory. And I was inebriated early on and so on and so forth. But by the way, everybody in college drinks too much. Let's be honest here. Most people do. I'm not holding this in any way against Miss Ramirez. She, too, deserves to have her story heard. But at some point, there's got to be some evidence, corroboration, and more than what the New Yorker holds as standards here. Now, I know that they've done some decent work, Ronan Farrow, with the Weinstein case, and I think that was the right thing to do. But I'm looking directly at the verbatim quotes here. Now, Judge Kavanaugh, and by the way, we're expecting the president at some point is going to speak and give a press conference. When that happens, we'll bring it to you. When I testified in front of the Senate 3 weeks ago, I explained my belief that fair process is foundational to justice and to our democracy. And I want to stop by saying this. One of the reasons I always have pause in these cases, I learned it, as I was mentioning in the last half hour in the Richard Jewell case. That had a profound impact on my life and career. Because my gut instinct at the time when the AJC, I was on the air at the time, broke the story. Remember, originally he was the hero, Richard Jewell. He since has passed away. And then all of a sudden, and by the way, I think it ruined his life. I think it just destroyed him. And I was on the air and I'm reading it. He fits the profile. And by the way, profiling is used by law enforcement. It's a tool is what it is. Just like it's a tool lie detector test, but they're not foolproof. And otherwise we would be, up. But you can't mechanically perfect that, or at least we haven't. One of the reasons everybody has a right to be skeptical, and we see it now, every 4 years, and I've got all the tape to play. I won't do it now because I don't have time. Republicans are racist. It comes up. Republicans don't want to even have the wrong agenda for African Americans. They don't want to count you in the census. Or you elect Republicans, black churches are going to burn. And it's like my father was killed all over again when George Bush rightly supported the death penalty in the James Byrd case. An innocent man dragged to his death by a bunch of racist, non-human beings. And then misogynist and Mitt Romney and binders. Mitt Romney cut a kid's hair. Remember that came up. And Republicans are racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. They want dirty air and water. Well, they drink the water and they breathe the air. but they just don't agree with environmental extremists. That's why that accusation is made. That Republicans want children to die. That you're going to get every election year a grandma getting thrown over a cliff by a Republican or a Paul Ryan lookalike. There is a history of doing that every election season by the Democrats. I have it chronicled. I have it down pat. I warn everybody it's going to happen. And just like in the case when Neil Gorsuch, when that opening occurred, or when Anthony Kennedy retired, what did I do? I pulled out the Bork statements by Ted Kennedy. I pulled out Clarence Thomas and what happened to him. And this is what Democrats do, sadly. That's their playbook for elections and Supreme Court nominees. They didn't have to wait for July to the last minute. They did that. Now, these stories are, I believe every person has a right to be heard here. But there are false allegations made. When I stood almost alone against the news media that wanted to convict kids as it relates to the Duke lacrosse case, I did my own investigative work, just like we did with Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, just like we did in Ferguson, just like we vetted Obama, just like Freddie Gray, just like the Cambridge police acted stupidly. And I'm not asking you to take a position. Just believe in due process. Just believe in the presumption of innocence here. Yes, let these women, let them be heard. Give them every courtesy, every accommodation you can. Then a vote needs to happen. Because everything that is mentioned here by these two women is overwhelmingly contradicted by now hundreds of other people that have known Kavanaugh from high school, through college, through law school, through the Bush administration, through female law clerks, through the people that he works with on the court now. I'm going to get to his letter when we get back. We'll follow the president and his press conference. We also have Sarah and Greg coming up. And, of course, all the Rod Rosenstein drama we haven't even gotten to yet. We got a lot to get to. All right, glad you're with us on what is a huge, busy, breaking news day. We're expecting the president to give a press conference. He's at the UN today. He'll be speaking tomorrow, and obviously we'll have some of those highlights as well. I want to get back to Brett Kavanaugh, and then we're going to get into the Rod Rosenstein issue, which I haven't even had time to touch today because of all the breaking news that has occurred. By the way, the White House will meet with Rod Rosenstein on Thursday, and so much drama today and so much false reporting today. And anyway, it doesn't surprise me. Let me so this is the letter that Brett Kavanaugh, and I just went over both cases, including the New Yorker bomb that dropped last night. But the New Yorker didn't confirm with other eyewitnesses that Kavanaugh was even present at the party. Her memories contain gaps. She admits she was inebriated very quickly and had been drinking pretty heavily at the time of the alleged incident. It wasn't until, well, she had to go through the issue for 6 days before she could settle on what had happened 34 years ago. And it was then at that point she felt confident enough in her recollections to say that she remembers Kavanaugh had exposed himself at a party when he was a freshman at Yale. She acknowledged herself that she had significant gaps in her memories that evening. The alleged eyewitnesses all denied it. The first one said one of the male classmates who Ramirez said egged on Kavanaugh denied any memory of the party. I don't think Brett would flash himself to Debbie or anybody for that matter. Others said, other classmates, Ramirez, that said Ramirez was involved in the incident, commented, we don't have any recollection of that. Her best friend in college even said, this is a woman I was best friends with. We shared intimate details of our lives. I was never told this story by her or by anybody else. Never came up. I didn't see it. I never heard of it happening. Other contemporaries deny it as well. Statement of two of those male classmates who Ramirez alleged were involved in the incident. The wife of the third male student she said was involved, and 3 other classmates disputed Ramirez's account of events. We were people closest to Brett Kavanaugh during his first year at Yale. He was a roommate to some of us. We spent a great deal of time with him, including in the dorm where this incident allegedly took place. Some of us who were also friends with Debbie Ramirez during and after her time at Yale. We can say with confidence that if the incident Debbie alleges ever occurred, we would have seen or heard about it, and we did not. And the behavior she describes would be completely out of character for Brett Kavanaugh. In addition, some of us knew Debbie long after Yale, and she never described this incident until Brett's Supreme Court nomination was pending. Editors from The New Yorker contacted some of us because we were the people who would know the truth, and we told them we never saw or heard about any of this. And Kavanaugh, of course, has denied it. I think one of the more interesting aspects of this is the New York Times had said that they've been investigating all of this for a week, and they had interviewed several dozen people over the past week in an attempt to corroborate her story, and could find no one with firsthand knowledge. Ms. Ramirez herself contacted former Yale classmates asking if they recalled the incident, and told some of them that she could not be certain. Mr. Kavanaugh was the one who exposed himself. I mean, this is not, there's too much here that you have to ask yourself, and this is where the history of the Democratic Party comes in, and the handling of Professor Ford's case comes in, and all of the people that were supposedly there have now spoken out, and spoken out loudly. The Senate Judiciary rightly took it seriously, contacted all the witnesses cited by Professor Ford. They all contradicted her account. Anyway, so Brett Kavanaugh, who will be on Martha McCallum's show tonight, we'll have some of those highlights on Hannity tonight. You know, he sent a letter to Charles Grassley, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and Dianne Feinstein, the ranking member. Dianne Feinstein's handling of all of this has been atrocious. Just absolutely, fundamentally atrocious. Even she at one point said, I have no idea if any of this is true. You know, the inconsistency by Democrats, it should cause everyone to pause. We played you the ad that is running in Ohio. Sherrod Brown, I mean, the horrible court allegations by his wife. Then we have Cory Booker writing about groping a high school friend as they fumbled upon a bed, and he's admitting such behavior. You know, Booker, facing criticism. Where are the Democrats' criticism of these two individuals here? You know, he writes in the 1990s while a student at Stanford, New Year's Eve, 1984. He was 15. He groped a female friend's breast after the two of them had kissed. With the Top Gun slogan ringing in my head, I slowly reached for her breast, he writes, of that night. After having my hand pushed away once, I reached my mark. Those are his words. The point of Booker's column was how at that moment in his work on the issue after it changed him and his views on women and consent and assault. It was a wake-up call. He said, I will never be the same. Well, Sherrod Brown walks the hall of Congress, and so does Cory Booker, 15 at the time. When I testified, Brett Kavanaugh writes, before the Senate 3 weeks ago, I explained my belief that a fair process is foundational to justice and to our democracy. At that time, I sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee for more than 31 hours and answered questions under oath. I then answered more questions at a confidential session. The following week, I responded to more than 1,200 written questions, more than have been submitted to all previous Supreme Court nominees combined. Think about that. Only after the exhaustive process was complete that I learned through the news media about a 36-year-old allegation from high school that had been asserted months earlier and withheld from me throughout the entire hearing process. First, it was an anonymous allegation that I had categorically and unequivocally denied. Soon after the accuser was identified, I repeated my denial on the record and made clear that I wished to appear before the committee. I then repeated my denials to committee investigators under criminal penalties for false statements. All of the witnesses identified by Dr. Ford as being present at the party she describes are on the record to the committee saying they have no recollection of any such party happening. I asked to testify before the committee again under oath as soon as possible so that both Dr. Ford and I could both be heard. I thank Chairman Grassley for scheduling that hearing for Thursday. Last night, another false and uncorroborated accusation from 35 years ago was published. Once again, those allegations have, those alleged to have been witnesses to the event deny it ever happened. There is now a frenzy to come up with something, anything, that will block this process and a vote on my confirmation from occurring. These are smears, pure and simple, and they debase our public discourse. But they are also a threat to any man or woman who wishes to serve our country. Such grotesque and obvious character assassination, if allowed to succeed, will dissuade competent and good people of all political persuasions. As I told the committee during my hearing, a federal judge must be independent, not swayed by public or political pressure. This is the kind of judge I will always be. I will not be intimidated into withdrawing from this process. The coordinated effort to destroy my good name will not drive me out. The vile threats of violence against my family will not drive me out. The last-minute character assassination will not succeed. I have devoted my career to serving the public in the cause of justice, and particularly to promoting equality and dignity of women. Women from every phase of my life have come forward to attest to my character, and I am grateful to them. I owe it to them and to my family to defend my integrity and my name. I look forward to answering questions from the Senate on Thursday. That's Brett Kavanaugh's response. Now, the Senate Judiciary contacted all the witnesses, as I told you. Dianne Feinstein demanding Grassley postpone the hearing, of course. Why did she hold it from? Because this is this is their plan. What she did in this particular case by withholding all of this is disgraceful. Because anybody that is being accused of something this serious needs an opportunity to be able to respond. And I'm going to tell you another thing. This is why the presumption of innocence is so important. This is why I've spent a lot of time on this program in the 30 years since I started in radio, learned a lot of lessons along the way. That's why I mentioned I've been at odds with the news media and often, usually proven right time after time. I learned that lesson in the Richard Jewell case. That's back in 1996. I learned that, we learned a lot during the Obama years. I learned when Obama was running, nobody was going to vet him. The only time he ever got asked, the one time he got asked about Ayers and Dorn was because I fed the question to George Stephanopoulos. And then you have the issue of Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, and the media, and then President Obama's rush to judgment. The rush to judgment as it relates to the Cambridge police, the rush to judgment in the Ferguson case, the rush to judgment in the Baltimore Freddie Gray case. Media has been wrong, and others have been wrong repeatedly because they rush to judgment and they don't give the presumption of innocence. So we're watching this all very, very closely. But I will tell you, anyone that says they know does not know. And you have to look at the entirety. The dramatic, when you look at the dramatic, inconsistent look at Brett Kavanaugh's life over 4 decades and so many people who have spoken to his character. He's a gentleman, et cetera, et cetera. And then the double standard. There's a reason. When I say that every 2 to 4 years they bring up racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, misogynistic, Islamophobic, dirty air, water, Republicans want, kill children, throw granny over the cliff. You know what it's like to call somebody racist if they're not? Sexist if they're not? Mitt Romney had binders of women's resumes. He wanted to hire the women. You know, if somebody, accuses you of this type of allegation, which is so serious and severe, they've got to have evidence. Something. There's a reason our system is designed the way it is. And yet, this happens. It's a playbook, sadly. That's why there is a reasonable skepticism of anybody based on a history of these tactics by Democrats. Anyway, 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. When the president speaks, apparently the president's about to sign a free trade agreement with South Korea. If he answers any other questions, we'll go to that. He's at the UN today, speaking tomorrow. We have Greg and Sarah. We're going to get finally to the Rod Rosenstein issue in a minute. All right, as we roll along, Sean Hannity Show, 800-941-SEAN is our number. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, has weighed in. I want to make it perfectly clear. Brett Kavanaugh will receive a vote. Kavanaugh decrying the smears in his letter to the committee. He's not going to be intimidated into withdrawing. Both Brett Kavanaugh and his wife will appear on Martha McCallum's show, 7 o'clock on the Fox News channel tonight. We'll have a follow-up to that as well. And just a lot happening with all of this. A lot happening. I've read the New Yorker story many times now. All the quotes and excerpts from the New Yorker that raise serious questions about this second allegation. One other note, it appears that Judge Kavanaugh has his calendar from 1982. He does. Never listed a party as the one the accuser describes. By the way, you have to be a nerd to have your...
Dude, that is serious nerddom.
That is serious nerddom. I mean, man, I've never kept a diary in my life. I don't even keep...
A calendar. You don't keep a calendar now.
I don't keep a calendar now, and I miss meetings because of it, as you know.
You're very good at that.
Yeah. Other people have to remind me, oh, you got an interview in 5 minutes. Did you call? I'm 10 minutes. Oh, I forgot. I'll call now. By the way, Professor Ford also hired, along with his liberal activist attorney, Andy McCabe's attorney. That's interesting. I know what the strategy is. Washington Post, by the way, well, I won't get into this right now. I want to hold that for a reason. Senate Democrats investigating the new allegation. You know what it is? Even in the New Yorker piece, they're actually admitting, like, the Democrats are now calling people. That's a really dangerous strategy. Oh, maybe you have something to say about him. I know this has happened in my life at least 30 times. Media calls everyone that's ever worked for me randomly. All right, Sarah, Greg, Rod Rosenstein, and that drama when we get back. And if the president speaks, we'll take it coming up. All right, 25 now till the top of the hour. Toll-free telephone numbers, 800-941-SEAN, if you want to join us. Two people that know Judge Kavanaugh will be joining us in a little bit. One actually has known him his entire life for the most part. We had a meeting, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein meeting with Chief of Staff John Kelly on Friday afternoon after the blockbuster New York Times bombshell story, which had the Deputy Attorney General, the one that also recommended the firing of James Comey and the guy that signed the last and final FISA warrant application as it relates to Carter Page, the renewal application. Anyway, after that meeting, Rosenstein put out another strongly worded statement denying the story. And the two men, by the way, the subject of the meeting was all of that. The two men also had discussions over the weekend in which the subject of Rod Rosenstein possibly resigning came up, according to a source familiar with the talks. And then there was a lot of drama. It had to be leaked by somebody in Rosenstein's camp, in my opinion, when he's going to the White House fully expecting to be fired. I said Friday night, I think this is a trap for the president. In other words, if he fires Rod Rosenstein, they were going to make this the Friday night massacre. And I am very concerned that anybody that works for the Department of Justice, and I have been very critical of Rod Rosenstein in particular, because he has been conflicted from the very beginning. he would be witness number one as it relates to, was this a case of obstruction? When the president fired James Comey, by the way, Rod Rosenstein had recommended the firing, even though we all know Article 2 gives the president full and complete authority over the executive branch under which the Department of Justice falls. The president, for example, could just demand a particular investigation. The president can, if he chooses, demand something be stopped. The president has not done any of these things at this particular point in time. He also appointed Robert Mueller, so there's a conflict there. Now, Rod Rosenstein is claiming that, I'll wear a blanking wire. I'll wear a blanking wire. Is that what you want me to do? You want me to tap the president, go into his office, and then we'll invoke the 25th Amendment? These are you can't even, these are unparalleled times we're living in. He never should have been involved in any of this from the get-go. Now, the president also, we've been waiting on the release of the unredacted materials and the declassification of the Gang of Eight materials, the 302s, which are the notes, interviews, and contemporaneous notes, in particular, Bruce Orr and Christopher Steele, and, of course, the pages 10 through 12 and 17 through 34, the infamous pages regarding the final FISA warrant application. Lindsey Graham this weekend had been saying the FBI and the DOJ are waging a bureaucratic coup against Donald Trump, which I agree with. And anyway, joining us now with the latest on all of this, we have investigative reporter Sarah Carter, also a Fox News contributor. And we have Greg Jarrett, author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Russian Hoax. Welcome, both of you, to the program. Sarah, let's start with all the drama that was going on today and what happened over the weekend and what happened Friday and what we expect is going to happen on Thursday when the president meets with Rod Rosenstein.
Well, everybody I've talked to, even on background, has said this is just such an extraordinary situation. We've never seen anything quite like this, in modern political history. And today's events were, Sean, nonetheless the same. I mean, it was back and forth. Everybody was on the edge of their seat. Of course, there are a lot of people that believe, as you do, as I do as well, that the leak came from the Department of Justice, that Rosenstein was expecting to be fired when he went into the White House today. And then, of course, I got a statement from Sarah Sanders later, like everyone else did, that the president and Rosenstein would be meeting on Thursday to extend their conversation about the recent news stories. And, the president's right now at the UN General Assembly, so he's got, full schedule ahead of him for the day. So he's kind of putting everything aside until Thursday. What we do know is this, is that there's been concern from the very beginning about Rod Rosenstein, his involvement in signing off on the third application renewal, the fourth and final FISA of Carter Page. He was also the same man who wrote the letter, actually a very well-written letter, about why James Comey failed at his job as the former director of the FBI, and handed that over to the president. And that was part of the impetus of why the president decided to let go of James Comey. Although we know the president now has said, I wish you would have done it on day one. I mean, I think that if Hillary Clinton had been elected, she would have done it on day one. The Democrats were screaming mad at Comey about how he handled everything, and a lot of them wanted him fired. It wasn't until the president actually did that then they came back with it's obstruction of justice. Well, how could it be obstruction if Rod Rosenstein himself is involved in it? And you're right. He's either the first witness, an eyewitness, or a co-conspirator. I mean, the guy can't oversee the special counsel. I think on Thursday, and what I'm hearing from people, the president is obviously, it's going to be up to the president to make his own determination and decision. From the people I've talked to, there's no doubt in a lot of people's minds that this was what Rod Rosenstein had said, that the New York Times article was accurate, that he wasn't just joking around. I think that it was very unexpected when the story dropped the next day, because remember, it was Rod Rosenstein who ran over to the White House in a panic, basically, that the president had declassified all those documents. And so not only did he go over there, but there was pressure from some other countries, apparently, to not let these documents go public and to turn them over to the Inspector General. And then the very next day, the New York Times, which had been working on the story for 2 months, it finally gets out. And what it appears, according to the sources that I've spoken with, is that McCabe knows he's going down. He's facing a grand jury. And now at this point in time, he's basically like, I'm not going down alone. I'm not going down on this sinking ship by myself. I'm going to take the other rats with me. And he's lashing back.
Let me go to Greg Jarrett. Greg, your take on all this.
Well, Rosenstein, at the very minimum, should be relieved of his job overseeing the special counsel case. Congress and the Inspector General should investigate these allegations that Rosenstein solicited people to secretly record the president and recruited cabinet members to depose Trump under the 25th Amendment. So Rosenstein needs to be removed from the special counsel case. Should have happened a long time ago because he has multiple conflicts of interest. As you point out, Sean, he's a fact witness in the case. Regulations say you cannot be a prosecutor and a witness all rolled into one. And, of course, he signed the FISA warrant to renew the spying on the Trump campaign associate Carter Page. So he cannot be in charge of an investigation involving his own underlying decisions. There are serious questions as to why Rosenstein chose Bob Mueller, who interviewed to be FBI director the day before he took the job as special counsel. Was the president not advised of this? He was not. Why didn't Rosenstein tell the president that? Why didn't Mueller tell the president that? Those are glaring conflicts of interest. And, in point of fact, under the law, there should never have been a special counsel. There has to be a conflict of interest. None was stated. Sessions had recused himself. Where's the conflict? Second of all, there has to be an identified crime. None was stated in the authorization order. And finally, a special counsel under the regulations is only permitted in criminal cases. This was never a criminal case. It was a counterintelligence probe. So there should never have been a special counsel. And this tells me that Rosenstein is part of this effort to frame Trump for things he didn't do.
But that's what's now falling apart. That's what is, layer by layer, the onion has now been unpeeled here. And what we now see is that the highest levels of our Department of Justice, our FBI, and we know the names now, Strzok and Page and McCabe and Comey and Justice Yates and Orr and Orr being a conduit for Christopher Steele. At the bottom of it all is the Hillary bought and paid for dossier put together by a foreign national, Christopher Steele, and then literally disseminated and spread like total propaganda, unconfirmed, unverified, uncorroborated lies before the campaign, and then used literally through a media leak strategy that we now know exists for the very purpose of helping to set up a special counsel, that coupled with James Comey's leak actions. And when Lisa Page says there was no evidence 9 months into this of any Trump-Russia collusion of any kind, it seems that it was all one big setup.
Yeah, it was a hoax. And this is just more evidence of a cesspool of corruption at the Department of Justice and the FBI. These top officials, you just named many of them, they sought to sabotage the president with false claims, to drive him from office, to undo the election results. These are people who were sworn to uphold the law, and yet, Sean, they manipulated it for their own partisan purposes. There needs to be a serious and legitimate investigation by a real prosecutor with a presentment to a grand jury for consideration of criminal charges against the people that you just identified at the FBI and the Department of Justice.
How does somebody ever, even in a joking fashion, ever suggest that, well, do you want me to wear a wire and mount an effort to invoke the 25th Amendment?
You just don't do that, Sean. That's not the behavior. In fact, that's not his normal behavior, according to people that I've spoken to. He's a pretty serious guy, Rod Rosenstein.
Yeah, but he also has a vicious temper. That has been reported to me by numerous people.
Absolutely, in a vicious temper. I mean, he would have to actually talk to the president, but we're also, remember, he's just one of others. He wasn't the only one. It wasn't just him and, Lisa Page and the others who were in that meeting. Apparently, according to the Times, and we know this from the anonymous op-ed that the Times published, which I think they published based on the fact that they were already working on this story. There are other people in the administration that were in cahoots with Rod Rosenstein. So as Greg said, there needs to be a full-fledged investigation. This is really literally an extension of what we're seeing as a silent coup or a white coup to overthrow, to remove a duly elected president of the United States. And this is why they've tried to corner President Trump, saying, oh, well, even if you know this information to be true, even if it's proven true, you can't get rid of Rod Rosenstein because now all of a sudden we're going to come at you tooth and nail and hold you accountable and say that this is obstruction. No, this is a president of the United States. And under Article 2, he has every authority to remove someone who is a danger to his presidency if he so chooses, and for any reason. So there needs to be an investigation.
Well, I think the president, and the New York Post pointed this out in an editorial today, Greg, is in a terrible position because the media that has been pushing a phony, fake, false narrative for 2 years, they would pounce on the legitimate firing of Rosenstein as a means of turning this into a Friday night massacre, the equivalent of a Saturday night massacre in Watergate, because they've been using those analogies forever. But yet the guy clearly deserves to be fired. Now, it is Jeff Sessions' Department of Justice, and here we're back to the same old question. Where's Jeff? Why is Jeff not involved? Why is Jeff not interviewing Rod Rosenstein? Why is Jeff not... This is his department. He would have the authority to fire the deputy attorney general.
He absolutely would. He should exercise at minimum. And your instincts are right. This would be the Friday night massacre as opposed to the Saturday night massacre or whatever night it takes place. That's the media would howl with their hair on fire. And so the way to handle this, it seems to me, is for Sessions to ask Rosenstein to recuse himself temporarily pending an investigation by Congress or the Inspector General or both. You're not firing him. You're simply removing him pending the results of an investigation. And I think that's the way to go. And there's plenty of reasons for that removal or recusal temporarily because of the multiple conflicts of interest that Rosenstein has. And given the New York Times story, and it does appear to be true. I don't believe for a moment he was being sarcastic. And the New York Times stands by their sources.
They adamantly stand by. And interesting, the New York Times, of all people, they held back. They said they reached out to dozens of people in the second allegation against Judge Kavanaugh. They couldn't find a single person in a week that would corroborate what this woman is saying from Yale. But stay right there. We'll continue more with Greg Jarrett and Sarah Carter.
Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions. Blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters. Rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight raids. And school children could not be taught about evolution. Writers and artists would be censured at the whim of government.
Neil Gorsuch, who I did not support as a Supreme Court justice, he's joined two of the most conservative justices, Clarence Thomas and Alito, on the court to take the position that the entire injunction should have been lifted. This is like the three horsemen of the apocalypse, and they're waiting for the fourth one to come along.
It is vital that Judge Roberts answer a wide range of questions openly, honestly, and fully in the coming months. The burden is on a nominee to the Supreme Court to prove that he is worthy, not on the Senate to prove that he is unworthy.
The most important reason I will oppose Judge Alito is that I have no confidence he will serve as a real check on the abuse of presidential power that we see so prevalent today in America.
The debate on Friday, Ellison was asked if he's confident there won't be any more allegations against him. Take a listen. I don't know what somebody might cook up, but I can tell you that there is absolutely nobody that I'm aware of who has any sort of, who's threatening or suggesting or has ever made a prior accusation.
He's running for Attorney General of Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't the concern about Kavanaugh and Professor Ford be more credible if Democrats were also condemning similar charges against Democrats in their midst, including Congressman Ellison?
I've been very clear that I make no excuses for anybody who engages in this kind of behavior. And as far as Keith Ellison, these allegations need to be investigated and appropriate action taken. Meanwhile, we have, within the next week or so, we have before us a nominee that is under a cloud. There's not even a modicum of investigation. And so we are left with basically he said, she said.
All right, there's a lot to absorb in all of that. News roundup and information overload hour here on the Sean Hannity Show. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. There's a couple of things. One, let's start with the first allegation by Professor Ford, and every single witness that she cited to support her allegation that she was sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh, they've now given their accounts to the Senate Judiciary Committee. All of them have contradicted Professor Ford's version of events. In an update released on Sunday, the Senate Judiciary Committee said it had been investigating Dr. Ford's allegations against Brett Kavanaugh for the past week, and they have now learned the identities of the 4 other individuals that Ford claimed were at the party where the alleged abuse took place. Remember, now we finally got the copy late today, but this is only Dianne Feinstein has held on to this now since July. And only today did they release the original letter that Professor Ford sent to Dianne Feinstein. And Dianne Feinstein had numerous opportunities when she met with Judge Kavanaugh alone, and of course during the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, never once raised this issue. Not one time. Now, the 4 individuals in the case of Professor Ford claimed that she claimed had attended the party were Judge Kavanaugh, Mark Judge, Patrick Smythe, Miss Leland Ingram Kaiser, according to the committee. Now, the committee, rightly, in my opinion, they've got to do their due diligence. They got to take allegations like this seriously. They have now had the opportunity to conduct a confidential interview with all of them. And Mr. Judge, Mr. Smythe, Miss Kaiser all deny having knowledge of any party matching what Professor Ford described, which, of course, bolsters Professor Kavanaugh's denials. Again, that's, 7 years ago. And the committee noted that Dr. Ford is the only firsthand witness not to provide a statement or to do the interview with the committee, and we expect that that's going to happen on Thursday. In its Sunday update, the Judiciary Committee said it tried to interview a 5th person, a former schoolmate of Ford's, who was not at the party but claimed on social media that the incident did happen. And that particular woman deleted her Facebook posts after the committee staff asked to speak with her, and she told National Public Radio that she really had no idea whether the alleged incident had happened. So they're doing everything right and responsible and have offered Professor Ford every consideration. Now we go to late last night, and Joan Maynard. And we'll get into her history with Clarence Thomas in a few minutes. But if you read this article closely, and Ronan Farrow, he's the guy, by the way, to his credit, that broke the Weinstein story. But the New Yorker, they too had never confirmed with any eyewitness that Kavanaugh was present at the party. She says in the interview that they had for the New Yorker that her memories contain gaps because she had been drinking at the time of the alleged incident. It wasn't until she had been, literally, it took 6 days for Ramirez that she said she felt confident enough that of her recollections to say that she does finally remember Kavanaugh had exposed himself at a drunken dormitory party. She acknowledges she quickly became inebriated at that party, that she was on the floor, foggy, slurring her words. These are her own words here, not mine. Ramirez acknowledged that there were significant gaps in her memories of the evening. The alleged eyewitnesses to it deny it. The first one said, quote, one of the male classmates who Ramirez said egged on Kavanaugh denied any memory of the party. I don't think Brett would flash himself to Debbie or anyone else for that matter. The second alleged eyewitness said the other male classmates Ramirez said was involved in the incident said, "I have zero recollection of anything like this." Her college best friend has said, "This is a woman that I was best friends with. We shared intimate details of our lives, and I was never told the story by her or by anyone else. It never came up. I didn't see it. I never heard it happening." And even the New York Times, after a week of investigations, they couldn't run with the story because they couldn't get a single person to corroborate it. Anyway, and Kavanaugh now denies it. All right, as we continue our top story today, and of course, all the drama with Rod Rosenstein earlier, Carrie Severino is with us, Chief Counsel, Policy Director, Judicial Crisis Network. Megan McCaleb is also with us. She went to high school with Brett Kavanaugh. They remain very good friends to this day. And thank you both for being with us. I appreciate you being here. Let me go to you, Megan. You know, you and about at least 100 other people have gone on the record and just said, this is not the person we knew then in high school or college or law school or anyone that's worked with him in any professional capacity at the Bush administration, female law clerks that he's had, that actually the contradiction is dramatic, that he was the total gentleman. What do you make of all this?
No, it is so frustrating. I really don't even know what to make of it. I mean, I have to tell you, of all those guys, and I knew all of them when we all hung out a lot, he was the most responsible one of the bunch. I can just tell you that. And it's so frustrating to me that this is coming out and that everyone she said that was at the party all said that it didn't happen or they weren't there or they don't remember it. And I just don't understand how it's still in the news constantly. Let's just wait until Thursday and let him respond. Also, I'd like to add, how come we haven't heard anything from any character witnesses of Chrissy Blasey Ford from high school? None of her guy friends, none of her girlfriends. We've heard nothing. And I think that speaks volumes as well.
You know, the people, and this is the thing, I mean, there's such a long intervening period of time here, and you get to look at the entirety of one's life. Listen, Megan, I'll be very honest with you. I have no idea. Now, I went to an all-boys high school, but maybe there's like 3 people that would say something nice about me. I don't know. I just, you know, at that point in my life, I was an incorrigible, rebellious jerk. And but for everyone to say this is the nicest guy, the most responsible guy, and everybody's consistent with that, that raises a lot of questions. Your thoughts, Carrie?
I absolutely agree. And I think that's part of the reason we're seeing these new, even less well-corroborated, more discredited allegations coming out, because the Democrats could see that this story about Dr. Ford was becoming less and less plausible by the day. Every day it was a new person. Oh, we found another person who was claimed to be at the party. He said nothing happened. She said nothing happened. And then, Judge Kavanaugh actually has contemporaneous calendars. So they went back and looked and said, okay, what was he even doing that summer? It's very difficult, of course, because her allegations are so vague, because you can't say, it happened on July 4th weekend. We don't know when during the summer, but he was gone much of that summer. He has other parties listed on there, nothing that correlates to the type party and the location with the people that she describes. So it's just one more nail in the coffin to what was already an increasingly implausible claim. So now I think then they're just taking it to a new level of more outrageous, more ridiculous claims. And this most recent one, I think, takes the cake because it is, she even originally talked to the New Yorker and said at the time she wasn't sure it was him. It took her 6 days in consultation with her lawyer, who is a active Democrat provided by the Democrats who were trying to gin up some story, to get to the point where she could be convinced to say, yes, maybe I do think it was him. I mean, this is not the hallmarks of a trustworthy witness, especially when you add in that, again, everyone she said was at this event denies that it happened, denies that Judge Kavanaugh had anything to do with it. So this is, a real character smear, and it's just looking uglier and uglier. I think a lot of people on the right are just getting absolutely fed up seeing the way that our whole judicial system, our Senate confirmation system, is getting dragged into the mud here, because this is a horribly disrespectful way to treat a nominee, and the senators aren't even respecting each other. Senator Hirono, as you played her clip, she said, I wish they'd do some investigating. The Senate Judiciary Committee has literally been doing investigations all week. They're supposed to be bipartisan, but the Senate Democrats are too busy getting in front of cameras demanding an investigation to actually do an investigation. They had the opportunity to ask Kavanaugh questions and to submit questions to all of these witnesses who have now submitted testimony that under penalty of felony, they swear is correct. The Democrats are just too busy showboating to actually do the investigation they're asking for. That's shameful.
The fact that this was held since July, this is one of the reasons I think people have to be skeptical. And also the history of what they did to Robert Bork and the lies and the smearing and the slander of Ted Kennedy and others back at the time. And this last minute, it's out of the same playbook. I keep telling people that every 4 years, every 2 years, election years, Republicans are racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, misogynist. They want dirty air, water. They want to kill children, and they want to throw Granny over the cliff. And we got Paul Ryan lookalike in an ad throwing Grandma over the cliff. And it's the same thing with Supreme Court nominations. It is last minute, oh, my God, these allegations, and then they begin to do the investigating, and there's no corroboration here. And then there's an entire other story that has emerged. All right, as we continue, Carrie Severino, she is the Chief Counsel Policy Director, Judicial Crisis Network. Megan McCaleb is with us. She went to high school with Brett Kavanaugh. Most kids in high school, I mean, this is kind of my generation, and I guess my life was a little bit of an anomaly. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and at 12 years of age, I was washing dishes in a restaurant every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and not coming home till 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and I was tending bar in my junior and senior year. Some nights I'd even do it during the week and then come home. But it seems like, that this guy was very different in every respect.
He was just very responsible and treated everybody with respect, and that's why these allegations just seem so out of left field. I mean, let me tell you, there were a lot of people that I knew in high school that were pretty wild and crazy that I would not be standing up for, and Brett is definitely worth standing up for.
It's interesting you say that. I was a little incorrigible, but I actually was working. I was obsessed with working as a kid, so I didn't really have the time to be incorrigible, although I don't think it's the best environment to be a bartender at 17, personally. If my own kids wanted to do it, the answer would be hell no. You're not following in your dad's footsteps. But I think more importantly, Carrie, I think the Republicans actually have handled this in the right manner. They have taken it seriously. They have sought all the witnesses that could have been around at the time that would know anything. They've talked to everybody. I think they've been very accommodating to Professor Ford and offering that she could do this in person. She could do it under oath. She could do it publicly, privately. They'll come to her and all those other things. I thought that was...
Absolutely. It's exceptional. I mean, when you look at how Senator Grassley has treated her versus Senator Feinstein, Senator Feinstein looked at it and either said this isn't credible and stuck it in a file drawer, or said, this could play out really well in September. Maybe we'll just put it on hold until then, treating her like a political chit and not actually like a real human being. So on the contrary, Chairman Grassley, within 24 hours of hearing the allegations and hearing her, and her lawyer was very adamant at the time, we want to have a hearing. The Democrats were saying we need a public hearing.
Right.
So he did exactly what they said. He put it on the calendar at the committee.
Let me pick this up on the other side. We have another quick break here. We'll come back. I'm going to hold you guys a few minutes over into the final half hour of the program today. Carrie Severino and Megan McCaleb. I believe Megan's on Hannity tonight, and Carrie too as well, 9 Eastern on the Fox News Channel. There's supposed to be an interview. We will be covering that with the Kavanaughs, both Brett Kavanaugh and his wife. That's on Hannity, 9 Eastern on Fox. Quick break, right back, and your calls coming up in the next half hour, straight ahead. All right, 25 till the top of the hour. We're going to get to your calls in just a minute. We've carried over Carrie Severino, who is the Chief Counsel Policy Director, Judicial Crisis Network. Megan McCaleb went to high school with Brett Kavanaugh. They remain good friends. Did you remain friends with him throughout high school, college, law school, into adulthood, when he worked for the Bush administration, through his time now being a judge, I think, 11 years now?
I did. We were friends through high school and through college, and then he moved away, clerked, was in California, but we always remained friends.
Tell us about how this is impacting his family. I remember, sadly, his daughters during the confirmation before the Senate Judiciary Committee, or the hearings that they had, that his daughters had to be escorted out of the room with all the antics that were going on there. And of course, Democrats turning it into a circus. But more than that, the people in the gallery were just atrocious. and they took those poor little girls out of the room. I felt bad for them. How are they holding up?
I think it's been really, really hard for the family. The kids are young, but I'm sure they hear stories, and Brett and Ashley have had to talk to them about it, and that's a hard thing to do for your fifth grader and your seventh grader. And it's also been difficult for their friends. A lot of their guy friends, the schools have been ripped apart, their characters have been ripped apart. It's been really difficult, and I just don't think the Senate Judiciary Committee took that into consideration in any way. And for Dr. Ford, too. I know it's torn her family apart.
But you also knew people that dated him.
I did.
In high school and in college.
Yeah, I did. And he always was a really decent, honorable guy. Always. I mean, never, ever did I ever hear anything like this.
What did you make of his statement today, defiant, I will not be intimidated?
I was really pleased to see that because I'm sure it does get very frustrating when it starts affecting your family and your young daughters and you get death threats and all that sort of thing. But he, I believe in him and he believes in himself and knows they are not true. And he is being smeared. And I'm so happy that he will not be intimidated from this process because it's too important.
Where does this go from here, Kerry? I mean, now you got, I guess, that guy Hannity who represents Stormy Daniels saying, I've got people too.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, well, look, he's another 2020 candidate trying to get a piece of the action here. But look, if his allegations are credible, he'll bring some evidence to the Judiciary Committee, but he has certainly not done so yet, despite the fact that they've even reached out to him, who's making, crazy allegations via tweet. So they're really trying to do their due diligence. But I think we're going to have the hearing on Thursday. I'm looking for, hopefully she shows. My understanding is she hasn't even fully agreed to it because she's making so many unreasonable demands of the committee. But I hope we'll get a chance to hear this. I know Judge Kavanaugh is looking forward to clearing his name because, to go back to your last exchange, I think what they're trying to do is a pattern of intimidation and bullying. They want people to say, you know what, I would love to serve my country, but I don't want to be have a character assassination go on.
All of these people, none of them are believers in the presumption of innocence. It's actually shocking to me. I mean, Mia Farrow, the mom of Ronan, whatever his name is, the guy that broke the story, Ronan Farrow, actually tweeted out, Clarence Thomas says he should resign. I mean, this is how far they want to go back to, 1991 now. It's becoming a crazy environment, guilt by accusation. And the fact that so few people, even United States senators, don't believe in a process. The people that are being judicious here are conservatives and even the Republicans. They're saying, let's listen to what she has to say. Anyway, yeah. And by the way, the same people that are so outraged here, they don't show any outrage over Keith Ellison. None. Whatsoever. Never said a word about him. And only when they got pressed now after the fact, long after the fact, maybe we should investigate him too. That was their answer. I really appreciate you both being with us. Megan McCaleb, thank you. Carrie Severino, thank you. We'll have all of this tonight and a breakdown I promise you won't get anywhere else in the media. Let's get to our busy telephones here in the meantime as we check in with Richard, who's in Kansas. Richard, hi. How are you? Glad you called.
I'm fine. I was deplorable. I just was recently promoted to Dreg.
By the way, what that means for those that don't know is that's Joe Biden saying that Trump supporters are the dregs of society.
Yeah, and I'm one of the people, millions of people. One of the reasons that I and millions of other people voted for the president was based on what he said about Supreme Court nominees. And if this thing goes belly up because Grassley and the rest of them can't grow a spine, I quite frankly don't see why I should bother voting, period.
I really believe that if Republicans, again, if the facts as they are known today remain the same and they don't confirm Judge Kavanaugh, again, all the people named in the case, the Senate Judiciary Committee has contacted all the, quote, witnesses cited by Professor Ford. They've all contradicted her story. All of them. None of them agree with her account of events. Then all the other issues that I brought up with the New Yorker, this other last-minute issue that's brought up, and I'm just guessing now based on Hannity wanting to be in the news every 5 seconds. There'll be another one before Thursday just to keep the momentum and create the impression. Listen, if Kavanaugh is not going to be intimidated by this, and his family is standing by him and facts don't change and Republicans don't back him, then at that point I think that it is problematic for the midterms for the Republicans. I don't think they'll be able to get anybody to go out for them. What's the point at that point?
I think there's only one way to stop this, and it would require a rule change. In the future, if somebody makes what would be a tortious or criminal accusation, it should immediately be removed from the committee and put in front of a judge in a court with all of the rules of evidence and cross-examination in place. That's the only thing that'll stop this business about uncorroborated last-minute allegations.
I appreciate the call, Richard. Thank you. Aaron is in Raleigh in North Carolina on the Sean Hannity Show. Aaron, how are you? We're glad you called.
I'm great, thanks. How are you, Sean?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I'm calling in. I have a comment about the information that Dr. Ford brought forth in her letter. I just found it interesting that the discrepancy that she couldn't remember where she was the evening of the alleged incident, how she got there, how she got home, but she was quick to name the Montgomery County or the county of Montgomery County in her letter. And I just thought that was interesting, got me thinking. I'm from that area. I grew up in that area. I graduated in 1985, and I lived in the same town as she did, and I know that the parties that we had or kids had back then could happen in Maryland, but could also happen in Washington, D.C. or Northern Virginia. Those private schools draw kids from all around the D.C. metropolitan area. So it's funny that she mentions, Montgomery County specifically, although not any clue where in Montgomery County. And I looked into it a little bit and saw the statute of limitations does not expire in Montgomery County, Maryland. However, if she was in D.C. or Northern Virginia, they would have expired. So I'm wondering if she's trying to hold herself to be able to turn this, if something goes criminal with it, she has some sort of case to hold on to.
Yeah, listen, I tend to agree with you. I don't know. I think it's very problematic that all four people, and again, we've been trying to be fair as we can be here. The Senate Judiciary Committee talked to all the, quote, people that were at this party cited by Professor Ford. They all contradicted her account. And I know that it's very, very hard to understand how everybody else sees it a different way. And the passion by which everybody from high school to today, 36 years, universally says this guy is not that guy. That's nearly 4 decades of one's life that person after person after person is discussing here. And then the people at the time saying that wasn't him then either. All of this needs to be taken into account by the Senate Judiciary Committee and by the Senate. And it's going to be very interesting, for all these Democrats to rush to judgment, for all these people to deny due process, for all these people to say, I believe her, for all these people then to say, well, I just can't vote for him based on this, but there's no corroboration of any kind going back 36, 7 years, whatever it is. I think it then becomes problematic for the Democrats and who they are. And the reason for skepticism more than any other is their history of borking, the slander of Robert Bork, the treatment of Clarence Thomas, etc. Anyway, Aaron, thank you. Hannah, next, Tennessee. How's our friend Marsha Blackburn doing down there? We really need that seat badly, and I hope everyone goes out in Tennessee to vote for Marsha.
Well, I hope so too. They're going to have a debate tomorrow evening on the local news on CBS.
Okay.
I don't know who's monitoring the debate, but they'll have one. Bredesen is a former governor, and he served very well, I think, and he sounds very credible when he talks, but he's old, and there are rumors that Chuck Schumer talked him into running, so who knows? I wouldn't vote for him. I'll vote for Marsha Blackburn, but it's going to be...
Here's the one thing I'd say to the people of Tennessee, and I love Tennessee. I got my radio career start 90 miles south of Nashville in Athens, Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. Who is Marsha Blackburn going to be voting with on most occasions? And who is her the former governor going to be voting with on most occasions? He's going to be with the Democrats. And
yes, he would be. He's a Democrat, so he would be voting for them. However, I think he was a decent governor. or I had just moved to Tennessee from Michigan at that time, so I'm really not that familiar, but I never heard a lot of grumbling about him. But I have 2 points to make today. First of all, I'm so happy the second accuser has come forth because she is so far out that it kind of saps the credibility from anything that has happened, and it kind of shows it up for what it is. It's part of a smear campaign. And I think it's easier to understand that with seeing her lack of credibility that's even worse than Ford's. The second thing is that these sanctimonious members of Congress who are having so much to say about Kavanaugh on simply an allegation are the same people that have a slush fund in Congress to cover their sexual allegations to keep them from being exposed. And I think since that's a fund that's paid by the taxpayers have a right to know who has been paid off in...
I think you're making a great point, and I'm going to tell you what your great point is. And there's some $14 million that we hear that has been spent to have these settlement agreements with people, Hannah. And if they want to make settlements, and by the way, I know companies sometimes make settlements and nobody was even guilty, but it's more cost effective not to. I understand the whole process behind it. And it's just by the time they finish litigating and the smearing and the reputation and going on defense. Anyway, so people make decisions for all sorts of reasons. But if you want to make that decision and you want to get involved in paying somebody, that needs to come out of your pocket, not our pocket. I agree with you. And if we paid for it, we have a right to know who got paid and why. I agree with you.
If they had to be exposed to the public, a lot of them that are running their mouths so strongly today would have less to say condemning someone else.
Listen, I think you raise a good point. I think we need that information. I'd rather have it sooner rather than later. And I think there's probably a lot of nervous congressmen and women and senators out there that, honestly, I just agree with you. I think if you're going to ask the taxpayers to pay off your settlement, sorry, we have a right to know. And that's 100%. Hannah, I thank you for the call, 800-941-SEAN. I have a minute left. Let's go to Jared is in Boulder City, Nevada. What's going on, Jared? We were there in Vegas last week. What's going on? Real quick.
Hey, did you have as much fun as we did? It was really good to see you there.
I had a great time. We had the best time. The only problem was the day after. I had to work all day, and I didn't get home till late. I got home. As a matter of fact, the sun was up when I landed.
Well, we love you here in Las Vegas, Sean, and we really appreciate you coming to visit.
It was my great pleasure. What's on your mind? You got 30 seconds.
Really quick, with regards to Kavanaugh and how the Democrats are acting, playing these dirty games, I really got to ask the Democrats, the moderate Democrats out there, is this really how they want their elected representatives acting? Because I think we should hold them to a higher standard than the way they're acting right now.
I think we've got to as well. I think we got to hold everybody to a higher standard. These are very trying, difficult times. Anyway, good call. Appreciate it. All right, Hannity tonight, 9 Eastern on the Fox News Channel. The latest on the Judge Kavanaugh issue involving a second accuser, but that story seems to be falling apart based on the accuser's own words. We'll get to details the mainstream media ignores. Also, the president's at the UN. He'll have a showdown with Rod Rosenstein Thursday. Lindsey Graham, Judge Pirro, Andy McCarthy, Sarah, Greg, Pam Bondi, and friends of Judge Kavanaugh. 9 Eastern, news you won't get anywhere else, including an exclusive interview with Martha McCallum and the Kavanaughs, both Judge Kavanaugh and his wife. We'll see you tonight at 9, back here tomorrow.